to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching ASEAN in Focus. On today's headlines. At least 17 bomb and arson attacks occurred overnight in Thailand's southern province of Pattani, Natardiwat, and Yala. Vehicles and commuters struggle to make their way through flooded streets in Myanmar's Yangon after heavy rains fell on the commercial hub. National Security Advisor Clarita Carlos' first visit to the Western Commander Westcom and Pag-asa Island highlights the government's commitment to protecting the people and the state.
จริงๆที่ผ่านมาเมื่อเดือน2 เดือนที่แล้วเนี่ยเรามีเคสจากอินเดียค่อนข้างเยอะ
An Indian man has been arrested at Thailand's main airport attempting to smuggle out a menagerie of live creatures, including a white desert fox and a raccoon. At least 17 bomb and arson attacks occurred overnight in Thailand's southern provinces of Pattani, Nataratiwat, and Yala. At least 7 people were injured. First, let's listen in.
ใส่ของอยู่แล้วก็พนักงานขนส่งของเซเว่นก็มาถึงแล้วก็มีเสียงระเบิดแล้วก็หลังจากนั้นพวกนี้ก็หนีออกจากประตูข้างนอกระเบิดตรงส่วนตรงไหน
No one has claimed responsibility for the attack so far. Police Captain Sarayut Kochwang said he received a report shortly before midnight that a suspect had entered a shop at a gas station in Yala's Yaha district, placed a black bag inside and warned employees to leave if they do not want to die. The workers left before the bag exploded 10 minutes later. 7 people were slightly injured in the incidents, according to a statement from the military, while police said they were gathering CCTV footage and other evidence. Authorities said the immediate motive for the wave of attacks was still unclear, but militants usually target symbols of the Thai state and its security forces. The coronavirus pandemic brought a lull in southern clashes between rebels and the military, but a 6-day gun battle in October last year killed 6 people. The southern region, heavily policed by Thai security forces, is culturally distinct from Buddhist-majority Thailand, which colonized the area bordering Malaysia over a century ago. A low-level conflict has rumbled in Thailand's southernmost provinces since 2004, killing more than 7,000 people as militants in the Muslim-majority region battle for greater autonomy from the state. Delegations representing the Thai government and Barisan Revolusi national rebels met in Kuala Lumpur in January for their first in-person peace talks in about 2 years, though no breakthrough was reported. In other news, UN envoy Noeleen Heyzer met with top junta officials in Myanmar. Take a look. The United Nations needs to review its approach to solving Myanmar's bloody post-coup crisis, according to the junta's foreign minister telling the world body's special envoy during her first visit to the country on Wednesday. UN envoy Noeleen Heyzer met with junta chief Min Aung Hlaing and called for an immediate end to violence and the release of all political prisoners, her office said in a statement. It also said she had raised a request to meet ousted civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi, who has been detained since the military coup and on Monday received another prison term in a secretive junta court. Heyzer's office said she had directly urged junta chief Min Aung Hlaing to impose a moratorium on all future executions. It also said she had conveyed a request from Australia's government for the junta to free detained Australian economist Sean Turnell, who is on trial accused of breaching the country's Official Secrets Act. Rights groups said they had little optimism, though, that her visit would persuade the military to end its bloody crackdown and engage in dialogue with opponents of its coup. UN envoys have visited when the military told them to, stayed where the military told them to, and met who the military arranged for them to meet, and then left when the military told them to, tweeted Mark Farmaner, director of Burma Campaign UK, a London-based rights group. During a time of increased economic strain triggered by COVID and repercussions of the war in Ukraine, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, paid a visit to Bangladesh. There, she painted a picture of rising food and fuel prices, a country extremely vulnerable to climate change and increased polarization triggered by next year's general elections. Take a look.
Bangladesh has been a leader in international fora on key human rights issues, such as migration and climate change. It has also stepped up to provide refuge to more than 1 million Rohingya refugees who were forced to flee persecution and serious international crimes being committed against them across the border in Myanmar. Bangladesh also continues to face challenges on the human rights front, and I have been able to discuss many of these extensively with the government and civil society members. In such circumstances, what is key is that people from various sectors of society are heard and they feel heard. Civil society members are important resources that governments need to tap into. Critical voices can help to identify the problems, to acknowledge them, to dive deep into the causes and discuss solutions. Acknowledging the challenges is always the first step to overcoming them. My exchanges with civil society representatives were rich and insightful. This was not surprising, as Bangladesh has historically had a wealth of civil society expertise in various fields. But successive UN human rights reports have documented a narrowing civic space, increased surveillance, intimidation and reprisal, often leading to self-censorship. Laws and policies over-regulating NGO and broadly restricting the freedom of expression make it difficult and sometimes risky for them to function effectively. There needs to be a space for more dialogue among political parties and with a wide range of civil society actors to prevent grievances from building and erupting in social unrest. The voices of women, religious minorities, and indigenous peoples, and especially young people, need to be heard.
She encouraged governments to tap into civil society to identify, recognize, and explore the causes of problems. Acknowledging challenges is always the first step to overcoming them, said the senior UN official. She also drew attention to successive UN human rights reports that have documented a narrowing of civic space, increased surveillance, intimidation, and reprisals, often leading to self-censorship. Meanwhile, vehicles and commuters struggled to make their way through flooded streets in Myanmar's Yangon after heavy rains fell on the commercial hub. Take a look.
Tonight, lot of jar, ye mate mono, Jaro yeta resuro, Namai, Jojo Laro jar, why look. Okay, a similar people. Lunch on the Avare, yeta, Jim the Diamond. No.
Lina do not what you thought. Lina do you thought that Emma, Elulemio, Emma, go on by the Compound.
According to 11Myanmar.com, local residents, including commuters and shopkeepers, had found difficulty going around the city as many townships were flooded this morning. Most of the townships in Yangon have been in flood, causing traffic congestion during rush hours. Social aid organizations distributed food packages to some flood victims. Heavy rain since the late night of August 16 caused traffic jams and difficulties for commuters in the city. According to the Department of Meteorology and Hydrology, monsoon was strong to vigorous over the Andaman Sea and Bay of Bengal. President Marcos Jr. has renewed his commitment to further bolster the Philippines' relations with China. This was after Marcos met with Chinese ambassador to the Philippines, Wang Shilian, at Malacanang Palace in Manila on Wednesday. Take a look. He said, "We welcome the Chinese ambassador to the Philippines, His Excellency Wang Shilian, in a courtesy call yesterday," Marcos said in a Facebook post, "and we are very grateful for the visit, and we look forward to further strengthening the relationship between China and the Philippines for the benefit of both our peoples." Photos of Marcos meeting with Wang were also uploaded on the president's official Facebook page. In May, Wang also met with Marcos to give the latter a congratulatory note on behalf of Chinese President Xi Jinping for winning the May 9 elections. President Xi, in his congratulatory message to President Marcos, has also pledged to improve the strategic and long-term bilateral ties between the two countries. He also assured to continue the great chapter of the China-Philippines friendship and cooperation for the new era. The Chinese government earlier invited President Marcos to visit China. President Marcos accepted the invitation during his meeting with Ambassador Wang, but no date has yet been set. In other news, National Security Advisor Clarita Carlos' first visit to the Western Command, or WESCOM, and Pag-asa Island highlights the government's commitment to protecting the people and the state. Take a look. Her visit bespeaks of our common aspiration, strong stand, and unwavering dedication to protecting the people and the state under our responsibility, according to WESCOM Chief Vice Admiral Alberto Carlos in a statement Wednesday night. During her official visit to these areas on Wednesday, Carlos met first with WESCOM officials before proceeding to Pag-asa Island via military aircraft. Upon arrival, Carlos met with the officials of the local government unit of Kalayaan Town, the military, and other uniformed personnel, plus its residents. Carlos said, quote, "In collaboration with our peace partners, we have done our best in ensuring that the NSA's official visit in WESCOM's area of responsibility is worthwhile and that there will be no stones unturned as to all security matters of utmost significance. Hence, WESCOM's commitment to national security and interest is and shall always be the order of the day," unquote. And tonight's other news, Taiwan displayed its most advanced fighter jet, the missile-equipped F-16V, in a rare nighttime demonstration in the wake of China's unprecedented military drills around the island. Take a look. Now, Beijing staged days of air and sea drills.
我们不会说因为压力，所以我们就工作做不好，我们没办法，不会。因为在这块土地上生存的都是我们的亲人，都是我们的眷属。我们现在的自由民主的生活方式，都是我们非常珍贵的一个价值。我们不可能因为敌人给我们压力，所以我们就不去保卫我们国家，那是不对。
Now, Beijing aired air and sea drills in the Taiwan Strait this month after visits by U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and a congressional delegation to the self-ruled island territory. Taipei has carried out its own drills to simulate defense against invasion by China, and on Wednesday, Air Force personnel loaded an F-16V fighter with a U.S.-made anti-ship missile in a combat readiness exercise at an airbase in eastern Hualien County. 6 5-16Vs later took off for night reconnaissance and training missions, including 2 armed with missiles, according to Taiwan's Air Force. Taiwan lives under constant threat of an invasion by China, which claims the democratically ruled island as part of its territory to be seized one day by force if necessary. Taipei has accused Beijing, meanwhile, of using the trip by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, the highest-ranking elected U.S. official to visit in decades, as an excuse to kickstart drills that would allow it to rehearse for an invasion. Taiwan has been upgrading its aging fleet of fighters in recent years as fear of military action by Beijing rises and as its Air Force is kept under constant pressure by more frequent Chinese incursions into its Air Defense Zone, or ADIZ. In other news, the United States and Taiwan announced objectives for trade negotiations set for the early autumn in another step to boost ties even as tensions soar with China over the self-ruled island. The negotiations would cover a variety of areas, including agriculture, digital trade, good regulatory practices, and removing trade barriers, according to the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative in a statement. The negotiations will deepen our trade and investment relationship, advance mutual trade priorities based on shared values, and promote innovation and inclusive economic growth for our workers and businesses, said Deputy United States Trade Representative Sarah Bianchi. We plan to pursue an ambitious schedule for achieving high standard commitments and meaningful outcomes covering the 11 trade areas in the negotiating mandate that will help build a fairer, more prosperous and resilient 21st century economy. The talks, dubbed the U.S.-Taiwan Initiative on 21st Century Trade, were unveiled on June 1st. And in recent weeks, tensions in the Taiwan Strait have soared to their highest in decades following a trip to Taipei by U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. The visit sparked a furious response from Beijing, which launched its largest ever military drills around the island. China views Taiwan as its own territory to be seized one day by force if necessary, and bristles at any perceived treatment of it as a sovereign nation-state. Malaysia's top court began hearing ex-leader Najib Razak's appeal to overturn his jail sentence for corruption in a high-stakes legal gambit that could see him locked up or potentially launching a political comeback. The federal court on Tuesday dismissed the former prime minister's plea for a retrial, clearing the way for the hearings, which will be held until August 26. Take a look.
I am shocked and bitterly disappointed with the decision of the judges not to allow me to adduce additional evidence. I believe the additional evidence will clearly indicate that Justice Nazlan was heavily conflicted. He was very much aware of the 1MDB and SRC transactions.
As lead counsel for the team, I must say that I'm terribly disappointed with the decision of the federal court this morning in rejecting our motion to adduce further evidence. The court is now adjourned to Thursday. Now, as counsel for Dato Sri, we have to make a decision by Thursday as to what is a course of action that we will take. We will give this very serious thought and consideration.
But as the hearing started, defense lawyer Hisham Tepo Tek surprised the court by telling the panel of 5 judges that he wanted to be discharged from the case. Chief Justice Tengku Maimun Tuan Mat told the lawyer that he cannot just discharge himself and called for a break. Najib was found guilty of abuse of power, money laundering, and criminal breach of trust over the transfer of 42 million ringgit or $10.1 million from a former 1MDB unit to his bank account. He was sentenced to 12 years in jail in July 2020, and an appellate court last December rejected his appeal, prompting him to mount a final plea before the federal court, where any ruling will be final. If the conviction is upheld, Najib will begin serving his jail sentence immediately, according to his lawyers. An acquittal, however, could propel him into contention for his former post, as he remains popular in Malaysia despite the huge 1MDB scandal that plagued his administration. The Philippines raised various priorities, including the assertion of the arbitral award in disputed waters at the 55th ASEAN Foreign Ministers Meeting and related meetings, or AMM. As Philippine leader to the ASEAN Senior Officials Meeting, Foreign Affairs Undersecretary for Bilateral Relations and ASEAN Affairs Maria Teresa Lazaro represented Secretary of Foreign Affairs Enrique Manalo during the foreign minister level meetings in the Cambodian capital city from July 30 to August 5. And during the 55th AMM, Ms. Lazaro reiterated that the arbitral award and the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, are the twin anchors of policy and actions of the Philippines on the SES-WPS, or South China Sea, or West Philippine Sea. She also said that while the Philippines remains committed to regional efforts to resolve disputes, it's taking note of the growing list of countries backing the award. Lazaro expressed hope that the new EAS Plan of Action to 2023 to 2027, which was adopted during the EAS Foreign Ministers meeting, will fuel the momentum of identifying concrete ways to address pressing regional and global challenges such as public health emergencies, climate change, and emerging opportunities in digital technologies among the new generation of issues. President Bongbong Marcos Jr. said the government is now negotiating with traders to bring down the price of sugar to as low as 70 pesos per kilogram. This as the government is now trying to address the local sugar supply shortage, which is now hampering the operations of local food manufacturers and causing the price of the sweetener to rise. During an ambush interview after the Pinas Lakas vaccination drive in Manila on Wednesday, he said he already engaged in talks with traders in an effort to stabilize the price of sugar. Based on its regular market monitoring, the Sugar Regulatory Administration, or SRA, reported the price of sugar in Metro Manila supermarkets was at 93 pesos and 1 centavo per kilogram, while that being sold in public markets in the region was at 95 pesos per kilogram. The price of refined sugar in Metro Manila was even higher, reaching 115 pesos per kilogram in supermarkets and 100 pesos per kilogram in public markets. Executive Secretary Victor Rodriguez on Thursday warned that the government will continue going after unscrupulous traders jacking up prices of food items, particularly sugar, as consumers continue to feel the burden of rising costs of commodities. Rodriguez made this remark after his office ordered the Bureau of Customs to raid a warehouse suspected of hoarding thousands of sacks of sugar amid consumer complaints about high sugar prices in San Fernando City, Pampanga. Here's Trixie Angeles, the press secretary. Let's listen in.
Dalawa ay kaninang umaga nagsagawa ng raid. Well, hindi po siya raid. I apologize. Nagsagawa ng exercise of visitorial powers ang ating Bureau of Customs tungo sa orders ni Executive Secretary Vic Rodriguez, tungo rin sa direktiba ng ating Pangulo na i-check ang mga warehouses para sa mga smuggled or hoarded na asukal. Kanina mayroon silang napadlock sa San Fernando, Pampanga. Nagkaroon ng on the suspicion or dahil may intel na na-receive ang BOC na ito ay possibly smuggled or suspected smuggled na asukal. At 10 o'clock this morning, nag-conduct po sila ng inventory at saka dumating din ang mga kinatawan ng DTI at ng Sugar Regulatory Administration to determine kung ito nga ay violation, ay hoarded na sugar or ginagamit sa price manipulation.
The BOC agents were assisted by barangay officials and the local unit of the Philippine National Police. Customs personnel immediately seized suspected hoarded sacks of imported sugar from Thailand, neatly stockpiled by the thousands inside the warehouse. They also seized hundreds of sacks of sugar found loaded inside delivery vans. And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back. An Indian man has been arrested at Thailand's main airport attempting to smuggle out a menagerie of live creatures, including a white desert fox and a raccoon. The Southeast Asian kingdom is a major transit hub for wildlife smugglers who often sell the animals onto China and Vietnam, although recent months have seen an uptick in trafficking to India. Take a look.
จริงๆที่ผ่านมาเมื่อเดือน2 เดือนที่แล้วเนี่ยเรามีเคสจากอินเดียค่อนข้างเยอะ ก็รับทราบถึงความผิดปกตินะว่าทำไมเรามีการลักลอบที่อินเดียค่อนข้างมากนะครับอันนี้เป็นเคสครั้งที่2ครั้งที่3ที่4แล้วที่เป็นกรณีที่ชาวอินเดียลักลอบส่งออกนะครับรวมถึงนำเข้าด้วยนะครับ
มันเป็นโอกาสและเป็นช่องทางที่สำคัญนะครับที่ทำให้เกิดความเสี่ยงของการเกิดโรคติดต่อระหว่างสัตว์และคนนะครับซึ่งตอนนี้เองเนี่ยโรคอุบัติใหม่หรือโรคติดต่อในคนหลากหลายชนิดที่เราพบเจอกันเนี่ยก็ล้วนเกิดมาจากสัตว์ป่าทั้งนั้นเพราะฉะนั้นนี่คือกิจกรรมหนึ่งนะครับซึ่งถือว่ามีความเสี่ยงโดยที่ยังสัมผัสเขาเพราะว่าเดี๋ยวมันติดเชื้อโรค
Abhilash Anaduri, 21, was found with 17 live creatures of 6 species, Thailand's Department of National Parks, Wildlife and Plant Conservation said in a statement. It said his haul included a white desert fox, 2 iguanas, and a pair of white pythons, as well as 3 monitor lizards and 8 marmoset monkeys. All of the animals were found in plastic baskets, hidden underneath sacks and packed in luggage, as he passed through X-ray machines at Bangkok's Suvarnabhumi Airport Tuesday night en route to Chennai. Officials estimated the creatures would be worth around 98,000 baht or $2,760 US, but they were perplexed as to how the animals came into Thailand. Meanwhile, Indonesia celebrated its first Independence Day at its future capital in the ancient rainforest of eastern Borneo on Wednesday, as the nation plans a move away from slowly sinking, traffic-clogged Jakarta.
Presiden bahwa kita akan mengadakan apa yang bekerja di sini bersama pekerja, utamanya adalah mengambil semangat dari kemerdekaan hari kemerdekaan kita ke-77 ya. Untuk benar-benar kita sama-sama bulatkan tekad semangat kita semua untuk membangun IKN. Sepihak bahwa kita ingin agar pembangunan ini benar-benar mengikuti tata kelola yang baik ya, clean and clear gitu ya semuanya, sehingga nantinya apa yang disebut environment, social and governance itu akan bisa terjaga dalam pembangunan di IKN ini.
Bendera siap.
It is a legacy project of President Joko Widodo, but environmentalists have warned it could accelerate the destruction of tropical jungles home to long-nosed monkeys and orangutans. The government is preparing to ramp up infrastructure projects to open the doors to the city, which will cover about 56,180 hectares on Borneo Island by the time Widodo leaves office in 2024. After the national flag was hoisted by officials to mark the occasion, workers at the site cheered in unison that they were ready to develop Nusantara, which means archipelago in Indonesian. Jakarta is home to 30 million people in its greater Manila metro area, and it has long been plagued by serious infrastructure problems and flooding exacerbated by climate change. It is sinking as much as 25 centimeters or 10 inches a year in some areas, double the global average for major coastal cities, with some experts predicting up to a third of the megalopolis could be underwater by 2050. Government officials say the new capital will take decades to be fully completed and inhabited by its planned population of 2 million people, and will help spread economic growth to an underdeveloped region. And that is our broadcast for tonight. Thank you for joining us here on ASEAN in Focus. Stay updated about the ASEAN region and beyond. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.